Hello, welcome back everyone. So this video is going to be about reflective practice in cooperative education at the University of Cincinnati. Before we start talking about the reflective practice model and how we get students to think about their co-op experiences, I want you to think about how co-op influences, impacts, or maybe even inspires the coursework that you're doing at the University of Cincinnati and your professional career trajectory. So why do you suppose we ask you to complete 5 co-op rotations at the University of Cincinnati? Why do you suppose we ask that you do at least 2 with the same employer? And why do you suppose we ask that you reflect each time you return from co-op? Take a moment and really think about the reasons why the co-op program at the University of Cincinnati may ask you to do these things. So last time we talked about Kolb's model for experiential learning, where he developed a 4-stage cyclical model that begins with the experience of going on an activity, and in our case cooperative education, the reflection component, the thinking component, which is the abstract conceptualization and adding new information, and then the application of new information to a new experience. So the most important component of Kolb's experiential learning model, in my opinion, is the reflection component. Now, others may argue that the most important component of the model is the experience itself. But without the reflection, without the ability to consider how you are different because of the experience that you had, then there is no real way for learning to continue. And so looking again at the experiential learning model as Kolb has laid it out, again, it's a linear sort of experience where you are going on your co-op program, coming back from co-op and reflecting on that experience, going through more coursework that will hopefully aid you in future co-ops, and then going back on co-op and applying what you've learned from your courses into that experience. Now, the best way I can associate a metaphor for this is software development. Back in the old days, software companies developed their software packages by a project-based model, which is to say that first they began to develop the software program, and typically this would be about 90% of what they were going to be doing in creating. They would then release it to a small group of individuals, which they would call beta testing. Now, beta testers were statistically relevant to the type of software being used, and beta testers would determine if the program that was created needed additional components, needed to remove components, or needed to fix components. And then the software developers would return to their 90% made program and add that last 10% and get it ready to be released to the public. Most software programs, once it was created, it took months, maybe years before a new version comes out. Now contrast that with an agile design in software development. Now, an agile design, especially one here using the Scrum framework, essentially teams use the product backlog to identify the priorities for projects, taking one item off the backlog at a time and working on that item until its completion, which is what we typically refer to as sprints. This process usually takes 2 to 4 weeks. Once the item is finished, it is then released to the client. The cycle then ends with a review and a retrospective or a reflection. Now, what's interesting about this model is that instead of taking a product to 90% or 100% completion, they take items off the top of the product backlog, create those, and release those to the public. That way, updates and releases can come more adaptably later on. And so today's software programs, releases for those programs typically come out sometimes even once a week, once a month, or maybe even more frequent than that. And so when you're thinking about the co-op program, thinking about how we take those cyclical or those linear sort of processes, but we compound them on one on top of each other. And so what we do is we create a series of individual experiences that build upon one another, so that linear process, while still technically a linear process, begins to cycle through each time, and what in the agile framework would refer to as sprints. And so in a agile framework, They are developing 10 to 20% of those priority items. They create multiple beta tests with multiple rounds of fixes and additions. They release just the priority items to the public. They return to the backlog for developing new priority items, and they release updates as they go. So that's my metaphor. How I equate that to co-op? Well, we teach you about 10 to 20% of what you need to know before we send you out on your first co-op. Obviously, we're not going to wait until the end of your 4 or 5 year career to give you that first opportunity. That's not what the co-op program is about. The co-op program is designed to put you in the right place at the right time with the right amount of information in order to be successful immediately. We ask that you co-op with the same employer twice. This way you have multiple perspectives at the same employer. You can go on co-op once for 1 semester, come back to the campus, reflect upon that, take some additional courses, learn some new content, and return to that same employer ready to work on either the same products or new products and being able to do them that much better. We send you on co-op early in your college career. We don't wait till your junior or your senior year. We start right away in your sophomore year because we want you to get out there as early as possible. We meet with you when you return from co-op in order to reflect on what you've learned during co-op and then to take what you're learning in the classroom and synthesize those two concepts together. Your faculty co-op advisor is the first stage of that process, and the faculty teaching your courses will hopefully incorporate your co-op experiences with what you're learning in the classroom as well. We require you to co-op for 5 terms because it enables you to gather as much experience as possible at multiple employers. Some students will of course choose to stay at the same employer for all 5 terms, but most students switch their co-op in between. After that first 2 semesters with the same employer, they'll do a new experience, and we recommend that because it enables you to create that much more diversity in what you are working. Now that you understand a little bit more about the reflective model of the Cooperative Education program at the University of Cincinnati, I want to talk to you about how you go about actually doing reflection. Now, Ronald Heifetz wrote a book in 1994 called Leadership Without Easy Answers. In the book, he described an experience what he called the balcony dance floor reflective model. Now, the balcony dance floor concept was originally designed to talk to students about how to enable yourself to be on both the dance floor and the balcony at the same time. In other words, if you've ever been to a dance club where they've had a big dance floor and a balcony kind of above, if you go up to the balcony, you're able to see the entire dance floor, everything that's happening, and you can see when one thing happens on one side of the room, how it affects the other side of the room. But when you're on the dance floor and you're dancing, if you've ever been to a dance and you're just kind of in it, your whole body's in it, your mind is in it, you're really not being able to experience everything else around you, only with what's 5 feet in front of your face. And so Heifetz used this metaphor as a way to get leaders specifically to understand that their role in the process of leadership is to get above the dance floor, get on the balcony, truly look at what's happening around you in order to be able to make effective change. Now, the process he used in order to explain the balcony dance floor concept was first to observe. And so getting up on the balcony, your first role is to observe what's really happening, what's really going on the dance floor. Then interpret what's happening, make some conclusions about what's going on, and then intervene in some way that will affect greater change. The 4th step is, once again, to get up to the balcony and observe what your intervention had on the experience, what outcome was created because of the intervention that you intended to do. So here's some strategies for observation. When you get up on that balcony, you're taking a look at that dance floor, think about the things that you're hearing, you're seeing, and what are you noticing. How are those things playing and interacting with each other, and how are they impacting what you're doing and what you're working on? In the observation stage, it's when questions begin to emerge. That's what drives the reflection process. The trouble is, most people tend to jump right into the interpretation phase, and when you do that, what you're looking at is merely just your opinion, not really your observations. Remember, your observations are what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and what you're noticing. Not what you think about this situation, not what you're hoping was going to happen, but what you've noticed, what you've heard, what you've seen. Finally, observations drive the reflection process. We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. All of our experiences that we've had in our lives, all of the people that we've interacted with, those all influence how we see the world. And so oftentimes What you're seeing, what you're observing, may be interpreted differently by someone else who's observing the exact same phenomenon. And that's because when we look at something, we look at it through the lens in which we've experienced ourselves. And that's why cooperative education at the University of Cincinnati is so important. It's not just about getting you some work experience that you can put on a resume and get you a job. What it's really about is reaffirming the career choices that you're making, or enabling you to make different choices based on your experiences. But whatever it is, the idea behind the cooperative education is reflection. That is reflective practice at the cooperative education program at the University of Cincinnati. Thanks, folks.